We're here at the International Conference here in Vancouver, BC, and we're here with Mark Wainberg, who is from the other coast in Canada, from Montreal at the
McGill
University. Right, I slipped out of my mind. So what we're really wanting to do is to give a sense of what your sense of the conference is. What are the things that happened? And I didn't mean to ask you before I get going on this. You were the chair of the last conference, or you were going to be the chair of the next IAS meeting? How was that?
I was the co-chair of the International AIDS Society Conference in Toronto in 2006.
But the one before that was the one that you were kind of...
So I was the president of the International AIDS Society during the Durban conference in South Africa.
Gotcha, all right.
And I always say that was really the most important thing I ever did in my life.
Yeah.
Getting that conference to Durban together with my colleagues, because it was a game changer in terms of drug access for people in developing countries.
It seems every conference has its forte, and it's the shining star, so to speak. And this one, I think, has been mostly about prevention, and what it means to really embrace the knowledge that we have now and the proof that we have that prevention does work.
Well, prevention works, and it's very clear that the drugs, the antiretroviral drugs that we use in therapy, are making a huge difference in prevention, because we know, A, that we can successfully use such modalities as pre-exposure prophylaxis, which is great. In other words, take Truvada, and now, of course, the French study, which we were part of as a satellite in Montreal, has shown that you don't have to take PrEP every day. You can just take it perhaps in anticipation of sexual relations and just after, and that's a great thing, because that will cut down on costs, it'll cut down on the toxicities that may be associated with the medicine as well in some cases. So that's all to the good. And then the other major lesson has been that people who take their drugs essentially are turned into non-infectious individuals in regard to their sexual contact. So prevention is a great thing, and it's always better to prevent than to cure.
And even the side effects that we were really worried about, or not worried about, but were concerned, some of the naysayers were saying, okay, what about the side effects? Well, there is a startup, and it appears that the startup is irrespective of whether you are going to be starting up for a daily regimen, or whether it's every other week, or however you do it. It's pretty much a one-time startup side effect that happens. And then once that's done, no matter how you use it from there on, it seems as though it's going to be okay.
Well, not only that, I think all the drugs that we're using now have become so much better in terms of side effects, and we're just seeing so little toxicity in relative terms, and that's one of the reasons that the latest kid on the block in terms of approvals, which is dolutegravir, seems to be a very safe drug, and that's one of the main reasons that the dolutegravir regimens did better than Atripla in the single study and darunavir in the Flamingo study. There were more dropouts because of toxicities in those other studies. So we definitely know it's not just drug potency, but it's also very much a question of using drugs that are safe and well tolerated.
It seems though, when you think about the days of the Noravir as a drug, not as a booster, and Crixivan, which was extremely hard to do at Q8. We talked about that because that's where they came. They were at this last conference here in 1996. And that was the watershed moment that we thought, well, we almost had a cure. Well, we thought we had a cure then. But as it were, we had a really good beginning to the number of drugs later that were 20-some, 30 drugs now that we're happy with rather than unhappy with.
Well, I think we're going to make a lot of progress toward a cure as well over the next decade. For the first time at these meetings, we're seeing specialty sessions and satellite conferences organized entirely on the topic of how are we going to cure HIV. So we have a critical mass now, finally, of people who are devoting themselves to the very notion that HIV can potentially be cured. I've been in this field a long time, and I know there are a lot of people in this field who are smarter than me. I have to believe that one of them is going to come up with a cure over the next decade.
And you notice,
I really mean that. I'm convinced it's going to happen.
and you notice that the posters are such that there's little incremental, something here that's towards a cure, over here it's towards a cure. So there's like massive amounts of effort being put forward, and the young investigators too, who are now rethinking things that you may have thought about. Well, we can't do that because we don't know this. Now we have a whole lot of new information that we can have a background by which to build a cure around. Before, I think there was the notion of a cure, but we didn't have the tools. And now I think Sharon Lewin's talking about standardizing those tools so there's more across disciplines knowledge about how to express what we know about the advancement towards a cure.
Right. Well, Sharon Lewin is definitely one of the stars in the cure field right now, and along with some others. And as I said, I think there is enough of a critical mass now engaged in this area that something's going to percolate over the next 5 years, and we're going to move on to a new track that will enable us to cure HIV, perhaps for some populations first and other populations later. And the single story, I think, that has had more press coverage out of this conference than any other has been the story of the now 18-year-old girl who has gone off therapy for 12 years and remains undetectable in regard to viral load. Surprisingly to me, that story has outperformed in terms of publicity coverage the very important data of the START trial, which quite honestly I think are way more important than the very nice story of this girl. I'm sure she's important, and it's a very nice story, but it is kind of anecdotal.
And it's novel.
And
It's
the
very
START
novel.
the START trial is really
Massive.
groundbreaking,
It's
massive
massive,
study involving thousands of people, and it showed clearly that the best time to start therapy if you're HIV positive and find out about it today is today. That's a very important study with loads of impact. It may have been predicted by many of us in terms of being a study with a logical outcome, but it's still very gratifying to have this result, and I think it was necessary to have this result.
Right. Well, I appreciate you bringing these things to our attention and amplifying them, because I think a few others that I've interviewed have echoed similar issues. But right now, I think it is important to get the messages out, and resoundingly so, because the messages of treatment as prevention is never more strong than today.
So I'll just end by telling you that in spite of how far we've come, we still have a long way to go. In this country, as was presented yesterday in a session on concentrated epidemics, we unfortunately have many people in Canada, many of Aboriginal origin who represent new epidemics that are clustering in terms of the same virus being responsible for multiple infections in Saskatchewan and in Manitoba. There have been similar episodes that have been reported on out of Indiana in the United States and in the Ukraine in Europe, and many of these seem to be driven by intravenous drug use involving patients who quite often are unlikely to be adherent to taking their meds. And one important message, I think, is that for this kind of population, we really want to use drugs that are not going to be prone to drug resistance. If people cannot be adherent, then we want to use drugs that are not going to be very prone to drug resistance. And fortunately now, I think we have two categories of drugs that fit this bill. One category is certainly the protease inhibitors that we had relied on for many years in this context, and now dolutegravir, the integrase inhibitor, seems to be another drug against which drug resistance seems to be very difficult to have, and it was approved almost 2 years ago by the FDA, and there still does not seem to be a single reported case in the literature of resistance against this drug of anybody who has taken it as part of a first-line therapeutic regimen. So that's great, and let's all hope for great things moving forward.
I absolutely agree with you. And thank you
you.
very much for being here, Mark.
Good.
Yep.